start with our fair game review. Okay. And we are going to go over ratio tables. Okay, so my ratio tables, we're going to start, just copy down what I write. So I'm going to put a 3 in the top, a 2 in the bottom. We're going to go with 9. We're going to go with 12, 4, and 5. Okay. So what we want to do is we want to try to figure out how to fill in our table, and we're looking for a multiplicative relationship between each of these entries. And so I notice right here I have the entire ratio, which should help me find something else. And I'm looking, and I know it's kind of a jump to get from 4 to 5. You'd have to multiply by a decimal or fraction there. Same thing with 9. But I did notice I can either go from 12 to 3 by dividing by 4, or 4 to 2 by dividing by 2. So since I saw this one first, I'm going to divide 12 by 4, because that'll get me to 3, and whatever I do to the top, I do to the bottom. And when I divided this by 4, I got 1. And what's really great about this is this is my base ratio, or if I have 3 over 1, this is my unit rate, okay? This should help me find some of my other entries. From here, I can go from 1 to 2 by multiplying by 2. Whatever you do at the bottom, you do to the top, so I get 6, okay? From here all the way over to there, I'm going to multiply by 5. 3 times 5 is 15. And then 3 times 3 is 9, so that means 1 times 3 is 3. Now what's really cool is that right now these look like entries in a ratio table, but remember, a ratio table is a way to organize equivalent ratios. So that means if I pull out 3 over 1, that's equivalent to 6 over 2. And if I knew that I had equivalent fractions, 3 times 2 is 6, 1 times 2 is 2. So I know these are equivalent ratios because they simplify to the same base ratio. But I also know that since they're in my ratio table, that they're also equal to 9 over 3, which means that 6 halves and 9 thirds are equivalent because they both simplify to 3 over 1. These are also equivalent to 12 over 4, and these are also equivalent to 15 over 5. So I can pull out all of those ratios from my ratio table and also set them equivalent this way, okay? All right, let's try another one. All right, we're going to go with 1, 6, 12, 12, 36, and 24. Okay, we're going to do the same thing, okay? And I noticed right here, since this is over 1, I know this is going to be my unit rate, or my base ratio here. So I'm going to really quickly, noticing that this right here is a complete ratio, I'm going to divide 6 by 6 to get 1, and I'm also going to divide 12 by 6 to get 2. So I can see that right here, I always like to circle these. This is going to be my unit rate, okay? I know to get from 1 to 12, you have to multiply by 12. 2 times 12 is 24. I know to get from, and here's something cool. So I noticed that if I multiply 12 times 3, and you can do this, 12 times 3, I can multiply 6 times 3 and get 18. I also noticed that 12 times 2 is 24, or I can multiply by 24, or I can multiply 6 by 4. Remember, you can do this with ratio tables because they're all equivalent. So I'm going to multiply 12 times 2. I'm also going to multiply 24 times 2, and I'm going to get 48. And again, in a ratio table is a way to organize equivalent ratios. So if I pull these out, that means 2 over 1 is equal to 12 over 6. And I can know this because 2 is twice as many as 1, 12 is twice as many as 6, 24 is twice as many as 12, 36 is twice as many as 18, and 48 is twice as many as 24. All of these guys are equivalent to one another. So 12 sixths is equivalent to 36 eighteenths. Okay? All right. let's go ahead and start with our learning target today. Doesn't seem very crisp to me today, but we'll see what happens. Okay, for our learning target, it says we will calculate and compare unit cost, unit cost or unit price, using tables like we did up here, tables, and something new, and proportions. Now this is something that's new, so let's see here. We are going to calculate and compare unit cost using tables and proportions. So we know that a ratio table is a way to organize equivalent ratios, Proportions, which is really cool, looks like this. It's just two or more equivalent ratios. So believe it or not, this right here that we wrote is a proportion. This right here that we wrote is a proportion, But we're going to separate it so that it's not exactly a whole bunch of equivalent ratios, but maybe just two. So we got a couple of new vocabulary words, so let's go ahead and write those out. So the first one was unit cost. And sometimes some people say unit price, and that's fine, because this is going to be your price or your cost per one item. Your price per one item. So this is what it looks like. Your price per one item would look like a ratio, price per item. We'll look at that. We'll look at that a little bit more in depth in here just a second. Your next vocabulary word was proportion. And this is two or more equivalent ratios. Now, in order to use proportion, this is going to be your more algebraic way of finding things like unit rate, unit cost, and things like that, So let's go ahead and get started. So I'm going to give you a question, and we are going to show how to answer that question using a proportion and also using a table. So here's your question. I paid $46.50 for 15 copies. How much did I pay per coffee? And when I say that, when I say how much did I pay per coffee, I mean for one, right? So let's take a look and break down our work here. So I paid, and I'm going to circle those important numbers, $46.50 for 15 coffees, right? So $46.50 for 15 copies. And this is kind of like per, right? And we know that that would be our price per item. So right now my price per item is $46.50 over 15 coffees, because that's what this says. So let's go ahead and write that down. So right now in my table, we'll do our table first. We have our price and we have our coffee. Now, something cool to remember about this when we're dealing with money, money is always on the top of the ratio, When we deal with things like speed, time is always going to be on the bottom, because time is going to be a ratio of how far you go and how long you travel. So I always say money on the top, time on the bottom. Money on the top, time on the bottom. Two different rates though, right? Okay, so then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to enter in my $46.50 for 15 coffees. Okay, in a table, I don't have anything else, but I wanted to know how much did I pay per coffee or for one coffee. So that is what I know. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use, okay, my skills, and I'm going to say, well, wait a minute, I know that I can divide 15 by 15 to get 1, so I'm going to do the same thing up here, and I'm going to divide by 15, okay? Now, when you do that, you can put it in a calculator, you can do long division, you're going to get $3.10, okay? We will answer this question after I do this as a proportion, okay? So this is your table example, okay? Now, if you wanted to set it up as a proportion, okay, remember what we're doing is we're looking for equivalent ratios. So this is really, really cool. So I start with my first ratio, and I know it's money on the top, okay? So I know that my first ratio is going to be 46.50 per, or for, 15 coffees, and I'm going to put C for coffees, okay? But I'm not looking for 15 coffees. I want to know how much I pay for one coffee. So I'm going to make another ratio, and I'm going to set it equal to one coffee, because all I'm doing is simplifying my ratio, right? I'm simplifying my ratio to find my unit rate. Okay, you'll notice the work is exactly the same over here. I'm going to divide by 15. We know with equivalent ratios, or we know with fractions, whatever you do to the top or whatever you do to the bottom, you have to do the top. So I'm going to divide by 15 again, and I'm going to get $3.10, okay? And this is your proportion example, okay? So this is two ways to do the same problem. This is going to be more algebraic. Eventually, we're just going to drop like our money and our C there, and we're just going to work with numbers, which is really nice, okay? So here's our answer. Here's how we would answer this question. I paid $46.50 for 15 coffees. How much did I pay for one coffee? And you would say, I paid $3.10 per coffee, okay? And we can also write this like up here. We can say $3.10 per coffee, just like that. Okay. All right. So this is how to find your unit rate or your unit price using a table, unit price using a proportion.